What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Kind of Funny Gamescast. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside the OK Beast, Blessing Adeoye Jr.
What's up, Greg?
Well, I was hoping you would change the red shirt. You know, on Games
No,
Daily, when we
man.
complimented you on it, we said you look too good in the red shirt.
I got too many compliments. Like I couldn't do it because like right before this, actually, we got the call from Kevin to join the Discord call.
Sure.
And I didn't join immediately because I wasn't wearing the red sweater. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to answer the call, but they're going to have to wait for like a minute before, so I can actually put this thing on. And so
I'm glad to see the power of looking good has gone to your head. You're a diva about it.
This is me permanently.
All right, fine. The former Imran Khan. How are you, Imran?
I'm doing good. I noticed the sacred symbols behind Blessing are lit up completely.
Yeah.
I've never seen them all lit up, so I assume it's because he's wearing the red shirt. They're lighting up in response to that.
Sure.
Oh yeah. That's exactly the reason. It's not because Greg and Barrett are making fun of the fact that they've been like intermittently lit up, not all lit up at the same time.
Do you like them all lit up, Imran? Do you like them all lit up?
What is your opinion?
It's hard to make out what they are all lit up. Like on camera, it's a little difficult. Yeah.
Fine, then get back up and go do it. Go ahead and go do it and alternate in between one and one. You know what I mean?
What are the sacred symbols?
They're the PlayStation buttons back there. So you got your cross, your circle, your square, triangle. Well, okay, I understand. Nate Fox, Sucker Punch creative director on Ghost of Tsushima. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm just really interested in all of your decor. So it's going to take me a little while to soak it all in.
Well, it's lucky for you that for Blessing, the decor is pretty much just the sacred symbols back there, and a backpack and a Butterfinger plush of Cloud.
Yeah, the backpack's the killer.
That's what pulls the room together. You can't have it without that, Nate.
My eye goes right to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I hate you. If you didn't know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Each and every week we come together to talk about the video games we love. Today is a very, very special episode. Of course, Nate is here from Sucker Punch. We are doing our Ghost of Tsushima spoiler cast. That means in just a little bit, I'm going to say, listen, gloves are off. We can spoil everything. And that means if you haven't beaten the game yet, you should turn off this podcast and go play the game and then come back. Don't worry. This podcast is not like a loaf of bread. It will age well. You don't have to worry about it. We're going the hot takes, the opinions, the information's going moldy. You can go take your time with Ghost. Come to us when you're ready. But that is the deal. Of course, this is the Kind of Funny Gamescast. You can get it each and every week over on patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, where you can get it ad-free. You can get it with an exclusive post show, and you can write in like so many of you did for this spoiler cast. Remember, if you have no bucks to toss our way, it's no big deal. You can head over to youtube.com/kindoffunnygames and Rooster Teeth and podcast services around the globe each and every week to get a brand new episode that has ads, no post show. That's why we say to go to Patreon. You don't like it? Too bad. Housekeeping for you. We've launched a new podcast. You can get the Kind of Funny Xcast right now on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames and podcast services. Thank you to our Patreon producers, James Hastings, Sancho West, Julian the Gluten-Free Gamer, Delaney Twinning, Jeffrey P. Long, Jesus Barrio, aka Bent Fork PR, Skin Tight Salmon, Game Jumper X, and Mohammed, aka Momo. Today, we are brought to you by ExpressVPN and Purple Mattress, but I'll tell you about that later. For now, let us begin the Ghost of Tsushima spoiler cast. This is your chance. Get out now. Pause the podcast if you haven't beaten Ghost of Tsushima yet. Okay. It's go time. Nate, you motherfucker killing that horse. I swear to God, dude. Like when Nobu got shot a bunch with the arrows, I was like, oh, that sucks. And then when we kept going and he kept limping and like, oh my God, don't do this. And you did it.
So first of all, you said Nobu. Mine was Kage.
What
about you, Blessing?
My second one was Kage.
I had Sora. And this is a whole interesting experience because I remember
Hearts loving. Go ahead.
Well, actually, yeah, it was Sora because I then changed to Kage. But Kevin, who's also playing the game, it's probably kind of funny, was hanging out at my place, and I was playing Ghost as he was sitting at my place, setting up my new PC that I'm rocking with, and I was playing with Kage, who was my second horse, and Kevin was like, "Oh, you went with the black horse named Kage," and I was like, yeah, because I realized Kevin hadn't made it that far yet. So I was like, yeah, I sure did.
Yeah, Nate, when does that kind of decision happen? Like, I obviously I want to talk about the entire journey of creating this game, moving from Infamous to this, but for something like that, I think we were talking about this earlier on the review too, or maybe it was PS I Love You, but playing that game and being like, okay, yeah, I'm into the story and this is great, blah, blah, blah. But it's not like a Last of Us where it's going to make me cry or do anything that, like, I tell the story of after I buried Nobu, Jen came out of her office and was just like, all right, so yeah, this just happened and blah, 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 blah. And she looked at me, she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, baby, they killed the horse. And she immediately went, they killed Nobu? And I was like, how do you know the name? She's like, I don't know any of the characters' names in this game. But if there's an animal in this game, I know the animal's name. I know Nobu. And she's like, immediately, he was just like Porty. I'm like, as soon as the horse died in the game, I caressed Porty. I started petting Porty. Like, when do you decide you're going to fuck up our feelings like that?
Well, it kind of takes a while to build a relationship with somebody so that when you hurt them like that, it gets a response. And who's better, more faithful, more of a friend than your horse, who will show up when you're getting chased by Mongols? And it seemed like the right thing to do to show that Jin was at his absolute lowest as he got ditched by his uncle and he was on his own. And what would be worse than that, losing your best friend? So it was to put him in that absolute darkest portion of the night so that he could come out of it the other side.
Did you guys, and I know that obviously as we're recording this, streams are just starting to happen. The game's just getting out into the public's hand. I know I've talked to other reviewers. People have seen that. I don't know if you've had conversations with that. In playtesting, in your own office, in the little bit you've seen, did you expect it to be as impactful as I think it was, as we think it is?
I definitely think that anytime you particularly wound an animal, it's really impactful emotionally. It's super weird that in video games, killing humans, you have no emotional reaction to it by and large. You're so conditioned to it in modern video games. But animals, it's a different story altogether. And so when we decided that we would kill your horse, who you named and you picked, so that you have some level of kind of ownership over that animal, who's been really your best friend. We did it so that you would have that reaction. That's why at the end of most missions, you see him sleeping on his horse or petting it, interacting with it, just to create that bond.
Yeah,
well, that's what I thought was. Sorry, go Imran.
Shortly after Taka died, I was like, "Oh no, Taka died." I was like, "That's sad." But then the horse died. I was like, "Oh, why did the horse die?"
The horse got more of like an emotional scene, I feel like, than even Taka did. Like Taka, of course, had the whole mission right that went down, and the way Taka went. Oh, we're gonna have to talk about that soon because that was kind of a heartbreaker for me. But when it was the horse, that's when I started getting flashbacks of Shadow of Colossus. Actually, spoilers for Shadow of Colossus. Also, did you guys have any like inspiration from that, or was there any like thought of, oh yeah, like we've had this in games before, but is there a way we can actually further this and make it unique to Ghost?
It was very much just us trying to look at who Jin had a really powerful relationship with, and it's the horse. I mean, I really like the character of Taka, and Taka's death is definitely a turning point when Jin just turns up the gas and says, I'm going to do whatever it takes to drive these Mongols out. But the horse is, I think, more personal, just because the horse doesn't talk to other characters. It doesn't have some relationship with you. It's just your pal, your pet, your friend. And so when it passes, it's a much more quiet and much more intimate moment.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stood out to me afterwards in reflecting on it is what you already talked about, but I think you guys do it so well of building that relationship, but never beating us over the head with it, where it's, a gameplay element, obviously, of, calling for your horse, getting on your horse, going. But then, like you're saying, of coming out of a mission and sleeping on it, or, when he like noses you while you're like sitting there posing and he like bumps you and you're like, all right, calm down or whatever. We saw this like non-verbal friendship continue and grow. And then even while I'd be on missions, right, it would be conversations with him of just like, oh, you're a good horse. And, one day we'll go for a quiet ride. And there were all these, Jin was able to express himself without ever having to have a scene with, Yuna or whoever was just like, oh, I love my horse and he's so good and I'd be lost without him and yada, yada, yada. It was just like, you did such a great job of building that relationship.
One thing that was a bit of a challenge making the game was that the main character is a samurai, and he needed to be kind of a rule-following samurai at the beginning of the game, which meant pretty stoic, right? And the guy we hired, grown up in Japan, and he keeps it pretty straight-laced for the first, half of the game, and that makes it a little harder to get in and understand him emotionally because he's so stoic. But the one clear way he always could kind of break through that was when he was being really kind to animals, in particular his horse, because he didn't need to be strong for anyone. He was just talking to his friend, the horse, who's an animal. And that's something we kind of pushed on because it gives a little light into Jin Sakai as in his relaxed state when no one's looking, when he can just be himself.
I actually kind of ended up resenting the transitionary horse between the first horse and the second, because Jin wasn't saying those nice things, so it fed back to me of no, fuck this horse. This isn't my horse.
Wait, plus it was all scrawny and weird back legs.
Did you pick the scrawny horse because you could have chosen to stay with the broken Charlie Brown Christmas tree horse?
Wait, hell no.
Good.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, I assume a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's broken down and it's ugly, but it's my ugly.
No, I went for a big white stallion as soon as I could.
Yeah, me too. When that option popped up, that's where I went. I had started with all black Nobu, and then I went to all white on the second time with Kage.
Well, I try to make kind of almost a narrative parallel decision to where, because I started off with Sora, who was the white horse. And when it came down to that decision, I kind of thought about it in the way of, okay, well, Jin is going from samurai to the ghost, right? He's going from this honorable warrior to now becoming this essentially Batman kind of thing. And so I was like, you know what, man, I'm gonna pick the black horse and I'm gonna call it Kage for Shadow, because I feel like this represents where I'm at right now, which I thought was a really cool thing in terms of the choice you're giving there as a player to kind of dictate what your future is going to be.
I made the opposite choice, but for the same reasons. For me, I knew I was going to become the ghost at some point, so I was like, okay, I'll choose a black horse named Kage, like a very ninja-like thing at first, because it's kind of like obviously the metaphor is yin yang for me. And then once Kage died and I had to choose another horse, I was like, okay, well, I want to hold on to a bit of the old Shimura Sakai Jin, so I'm going to choose a white horse named Nobu, because it seemed more samurai to me.
Sure. And that I think we're starting to play around with one of the themes we've talked a lot about in both the review and then P.S. I Love You, right? Of this Jin's journey of going from samurai to being ghost, and how I don't know how much you said you watched some of the review, if not all of it, and then us talking on P.S. I Love You, Nate. I was so impressed when it was all said and done that being a big Sucker Punch fan, being a huge Infamous fan, right? I'm used to making the choice of, is this my good or bad playthrough? And then going that way. And for you guys to eliminate the morality system of it, but still play with the idea of it, where we started and Jin was and his uncle were very upfront about what samurais were, and that you address it head on, and when originally is oh, we should do thief things, and you're like, no way, whatever. I played the game that way and felt guilty when I would do the ghost-like things until the moment we're talking about, right, where it is gloves off, I am the ghost. When I told Uncle that I am the ghost, that's what's happening. From there on out, that's when I immediately dyed all my clothes black, and I'm I'm stealthing everything from here on out, and I don't even need standoffs. I thought that was so impressive that you did all that without, again, beating me over the head with it or making it a gameplay. Well, you should play this way because you'd get this, better gear, weapons, whatever. If we're talking about Infamous and, doubling down on those choices and building that character. Is that something you were consciously doing, or is that something that we're reading into it knowing your past work?
Well, the transition of Jin struggling to go away from his code, go away from the man he always thought he would be, to become the ghost for the greater good, right? To save his home and the people he loves. That's the narrative spine of the story. And one of the things that we tried to do that is a little bit different than we've done in the past is have the player participate in that transformation by upgrading and choosing abilities that allow them to become more and more of that ghost-like character. As you go through the upgrade tree and as you get new abilities, Jin becomes more capable of terrifying enemies. He becomes more capable of moving smoothly where Mongols can't see him and just assassinating them. And the enemies get to be such a big number that it really is pretty. It's the way to go. And so the player is participating. They're interactively doing the same thing that Jin is. So yeah, it was absolutely on purpose. We wanted you to experience Jin's transformation, not just get told about it.
Mm-hmm. And so reading reviews, and hearing criticism so far of it, right? Like I've seen some people talk about how, oh, well, it's got a slow start. And I personally didn't feel that way. I was along for the ride, but were you ready for that? Did you understand that? Again, the title's The Ghost of Tsushima, right? And even when I was reviewing it and I was mentioning like, oh, there's this moment where, what's the name of the game? You become the ghost, like, right? You have to embrace that identity at some point. Did you think there'd be a push and pull between people who wanted to play it just as a samurai, people who didn't understand they were going on this journey or wouldn't see it to that part?
Well, I mean, the beginning in a game as big and as complex as Ghost of Tsushima, there's a lot that people need to come to grips with. And there's the narrative setup, there's the different kind of ways in which you fight, and the fighting's not crazy simple. And kind of understanding how you move around the world. So I think in that first day of play, people are just figuring out how they can interact with the world. And that can be, quite a lot to take in given the scope of the game. And then once you get your feet underneath you, who doesn't want to be a samurai, right? To me, that's the major appeal of the game. Being a samurai in the open world is the X factor for me that drove myself and so many other sucker punchers to want to make this title. So yeah, I could totally imagine that people get in, they're acting as a samurai, and they don't instantly want to let go of that to become the ghost. It takes a little while.
Sure. So then talk to me about how this does start. Let's go way back, right? Because you do Infamous, Second Son, right? You do First Light, and both are set in the most familiar territory possible of Seattle, right? Where you guys are. You're up there in Bellevue. You're doing something close to home. It's your third Infamous game. You guys finish that. You finish the fetch stuff. Is there the idea to do Infamous 4? Is there an idea to do something radically different? Like, where does Ghost start? Where were you guys at when you finished all of the Infamous stuff?
When we finished Infamous, we were just pretty ready to do something new. I mean, we've been at it for so long. So the company pitched in a lot of ideas, and working on an open world samurai game was just the most alluring. When we came upon the Mongol invasion of Tsushima Island in 1274, it really set up an excellent external conflict that it was easy to understand why you wanted to fight, why going around the world was worthwhile. And it felt like a natural fit with that wandering samurai fantasy.
Mitchell from Canada.
Oh,
you hold your horses. All right. You want to hold your horses?
I'll hoard these
Mitchell
horses.
from Canada deserves the floor. Wrote into patreon.com/kindoffunnygames and says, I have a question for Nate Brox from Sucker Punch. Where did the idea to take the studio in this bold new direction rather than taking the safe route of a new Infamous game come from? Mainly, what made you feel that Jin's story was a story that needed to be told? Did you start with the idea for the story or simply the idea of a samurai game and build around that? Selfishly, I'd also like to know if Sucker Punch has any interest in returning to Infamous in the future, or if you're interested in new things. I know that Greg's a fan of those games too, but there's still lots of posts showing up on PlayStation subreddits about the series. Thanks for reading my question if you do, and have a good day. Mitchell from Canada. So for Mitchell's question, yeah, you talk about the samurai game idea gets tossed out in this company kick around. You look at Tsushima, that's great. Where does Jin fall into it? Like, what made you feel that his was the story, or how did you get that part of it?
So, like, maybe the next day, we're talking about, let's do an open world samurai game. And I've been looking at this history and the invasion, and the elevator pitch for the story is a samurai has to give up his code and become a new type of warrior in order to save his island home from Mongol invaders. So in that sentence, which we had really early, I mean, at the beginning, we knew what the arc was going to be for the hero character. And definitely the samurai fantasy came first, but right next to that was this idea that Jin was going to become something more than just a samurai. He was going to become the ghost. So that there was this feeling of personal sacrifice.
Blessing Adeoye Jr.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what was the transition like between creating a world like the Infamous games, where it does feel more, the world feels more like a playground, as opposed to what we have in Ghost of Tsushima, which is more explorable and feels more vast and expansive, and feels like something you're uncovering as you're going along, as opposed to Infamous that feels more like, hey, we're creating this world so you can have fun as you jump around and beat bad guys and use your abilities and all these things.
So in Infamous, we built cities that were jungle gyms. They're meant to be climbed and jumped and swung on, and you can interact with them in all these different ways. And for Ghost of Tsushima, we wanted to make a landscape that was a wrapped Christmas present. That you saw something on the hill and you thought, what is that? I'm going to check it out. So it was about rewarding curiosity, unlike building a jungle gym, which was just a physical act of zooming and grinding and doing all these kind of skateboard tricks with your superpowers. Tsushima is very, very different. It is a much kind of more contemplative kind of. It's more about looking at the world and feeling what's out there versus just the immediacy of being able to turn on your powers and zip around with dynamic action.
What was the thing that drove that change? Like, why did you guys decide that was the direction you wanted to go?
Well, we wanted to make a grounded samurai game in the mold of the classic samurai films that we all really admired. Seven Samurai being the real heavy hitter, as well as Yojimbo. And these are games where people don't zip around with superpowers, right? They're humans on horses who walk into town and they solve problems with their wits and their sword arm, and that's it. So trying to be true to the source material really is huge.
In that vein, you kind of mentioned history a little bit. So I ended up reading, when I found out I was going to review the game, I ended up reading about the Mongol invasion of Tsushima and all that. The story in the game is fictitious, I guess. Obviously,
yes, it is.
But in the actual history, samurai, the Mongols mostly got wiped out by a storm. When I finished the game, and this may be like my brain just reaching for interpretation, but I was like, oh, was it just that's what Japan told people because they didn't want people to know about Jin? Or was that just not even a thought in Sucker Punch?
Well, because what the real history is, I bet you saw a lot of what was going on. The end of the game, actually, there is a storm, a huge wind that comes in that forces all the Mongol boats into a bay that gives Jin this opportunity to slay them all. On top of that, Jin's kind of spiritual connection to the island is largely referenced by wind, this divine wind. That is playing into Kamikaze as well. If you look at his saya on the Sakai steel, there's lightning and storm winds on it as well. This is all referencing the real event that took down the Armada. Even though in our fictional story, it is Jin and Shimura and a lot of people risking themselves to destroy the Mongols. If you know the history, you can see the connection.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. That makes so much sense, really cool. Right? The real historical things, this storm coming in, and then they on the same night, obviously you guys Jin strikes or whatever. That makes a lot of sense in terms of history meeting fiction. So
actually go for it.
Nate, it's just an example. Like our game is certainly takes inspiration from history, but it is not historically accurate. Our version of Tsushima is not stone for stone the same place. It's got a lot more diversity and kind of elevation change that is very friendly for a video game and very friendly for trying to reproduce a cinematic samurai movie feel. But those kind of nods to what happened in time and what was happening culturally were really important to us for a feeling of authenticity.
So the question I was going to throw out there has to do with the ending of the game. and like mainly the choice to have the choice, as Jin, of whether you want to go the route of slaying your uncle in honor or letting your uncle live. That was a choice for me. When I got there, I was shocked that you guys were going that route, because up to this point it felt like you guys were giving us the story you wanted to tell us, where once I got there I was like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder how this reflects for possible future games in the franchise if you decide to have a decision that might split what the ripples are going to be coming forward. Is that something that you guys thought about at all, or was this really a thing where you guys were like, hey, we want people to be able to own the Jin that they're playing in their story?
Well, we knew we wanted to tell one story, and that was that transformation from samurai to ghost. And little bit by little bit, Jin is letting go of that old self-concept of who he was going to be, even at the expense of his relationship and he loves most, his uncle. So you get to the very, very end, and we haven't given you these choices like this in the narrative because we're telling this one story. And now we're at the end, and it is time to put a period on the sentence. And I wanted to give players a moment where they had to own it. They had to say, yeah, I'm going to actively participate in this story. I'm going to be the ghost. I'm going to reject tradition. My uncle's begging me to kill him. If you care about your uncle, if you love your uncle, you're going to do what he asks. Or you're going to say, I turn my back on all that. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm going to leave you alone. And so by giving you that one choice, it's to bring the transformation solidly home.
Do you feel like there was a right answer?
What did you choose?
Yeah, I want to know what everybody chose.
I do.
I chose to let him live, because I feel like at that point, for me, the way I interpreted Jin, right? Like, I mean, he'd spent all this time essentially backing away from samurai tradition and becoming his own person, and really seeing the value of, hey, we don't necessarily have to live by these stringent ideals. Like, we can essentially act in ways that are going to better us and better our people, despite being against tradition. And so for me, Jin in that moment, the way I saw it, wouldn't have killed his uncle. Like, for me, he would have that was the last step into backing away from that samurai tradition.
Imran, what did you do?
Same's blessing, but my reasoning was exactly what Jin said after, actually. It was, I'm not going to kill my family. Like, the long and short of that whole journey for me was, he doesn't care about tradition or honor. He cares about what the people around him are actually doing and staying alive.
For me, it was interesting because when the choice popped up, I thought it was such an easy one. Of like, oh, well, the whole game, whatever is this? And I'm the only person I've talked to who killed him. It popped up and I'm like, my uncle is a slave to tradition. Like, I'm going to give him this. This is what he wants. I know this is what he wants. This has been, we have no relationship anymore. He wanted to fucking fight me to the death. You know what I mean? Like, this is what he wanted, and I don't agree with it, but like, I got to go my own way anyway. So yeah, I got kneeled right in front of him, took out my little sword, stabbed him, and he thanks me. And I'm like, all right, I did the right thing here. Mission accomplished. In your ending, does he I assume he yells at you, right? And like, you leave and he's like, ah! Or no, what is that?
He's mostly upset that, like, he's like, it will never stop. People are always going to pursue you. And he's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Nate, what did you pick? What to you? What's your true ending?
So the true ending would be Jin leaving his uncle alive and saying, "I don't care about your rules. I'm past that now. I'm something else. I'm the ghost." However, my personal Nate Fox emotional response when I play the game is, I kill him every time.
Yeah.
The reason why is because I like him. And ironically, liking him means you should kill him.
That is another thing I think we didn't talk about in the review, obviously, because it wasn't for spoilers, but I really, really dug the relationship between Jin and his uncle. And it was that, when I was doing the early stuff and I was doing some of the assassination stuff and some of the ghost stuff, I was like, oh, this isn't going to go over well with my uncle. And sure enough, Khan's like, teasing him that, oh yeah, he's already, Jin would never do that, blah, blah, blah. And then when he saw me do some of the assassin stuff, he's like, I don't like that. I'm like, all right, cool. And then we did the terrifying thing, holding up his head. He's like, gee, Jin, what are you doing? And then like, when we actually have the break, like, I thought it was all, a credit to your cast, so well acted and so well written of, turning around with the adoption papers in his hands and like tossing them into the fire and having this, irreparable damage done, and then having to sneak out of your own camp where everybody loves you and seeing your relationship deteriorate with Uncle and then getting to fight against Uncle at the very end, even though he shows up to help or whatever. It's like, I'm with you that it's that rare thing where in any story, let alone a video game, I feel like we get to that fight and I'm like, I don't agree with how we got here. I clearly don't agree with you on what you're saying, but I still love you. Like, I still dig you. Like, I know what you're all about and I understand why there's this chasm between us that you can't cross with me. And that's why I will kill you.
It was kind of interesting to me. Like, I had not played Last of Us by the time I played this game, but I'd known enough about the game that I knew that the gist of it was don't let revenge consume you. And then I started playing this, and this game was like, fuck yeah, revenge. Like, get as much revenge as you possibly can. So it was like the proximity of these two games coming out where Jin is very much not lauded by society, but like lauded by his own inner group for doing what it takes to quell this invasion is on it. Like, it's a bit funny, but like really interesting to me about how those two coincide.
For me, it's interesting you call it revenge. I never thought of it that way. For me, it always was we were at war. We were trying to I'm trying to liberate the island, and it is that thing. It reminded me of like when we learn about, and when I don't even know. Blessing, you're younger than me. I don't even know if they even teach American history anymore. But when we would learn about the Revolutionary War, right, and how it was that the colonists rebelling or whatever, they just refused to fight in like the single file lines like the British were fighting, and that's why we were able to do it. Like, that is how I kept trying to explain the story to people, that I was like, well, yeah, this island, samurais, they know how to fight this very traditional, respectful way, but the Mongols come in and they're not about that. So it's like, literally the crux in the very beginning of it are like, do you die by tradition or do you evolve into something that might be a monster as well? And so on that journey, I never was thinking about it as a revenge thing as much as I was thinking about trying to get these people off my land, get out of my country.
For me, it was like the moment it was revenge was Yuna's side quest, where granted those were against Japanese people, but like it was specifically when you were kicking those three brothers and you were taking off their heads. Yeah, I was like, this is straight up just revenge is great.
Yeah, that's true. That'll give you okay.
I will say I did as I was playing Ghosts. It's tough because they're so close in proximity to each other, but I was also having that last conversation in my head too of like, oh yeah, that game is making such a statement on revenge and on violence in video games in particular. And as I was playing through Ghosts, I was like, oh snap, this is making, I mean, definitely there are different observations in Ghost, and there's a totally different direction as far as what Ghost has to say about violence and about war and about revenge and all these different things. But for me, it was like, all right, what is honorable, what's not honorable, and when is it worth it to not be honorable? Which is why I found the uncle character so interesting, because there was no point in the story for the uncle character. Well, let me not say no point. There are very few points in the story with the uncle character where I was like, he's being too harsh, or where I was like, I don't get where he's coming from. Like, for the most part, I was like, okay, this guy's making some good points. Like, at what point do we become the monster? Like, at what point, at what point are we stooping down to their level? Especially when Jin starts to use things like poison, right, for war and all this stuff. And so I found that dynamic super interesting. And I found that like I was pretty satisfied with where we got toward the end, where I was expecting toward the end of Act 1 for Jin's uncle to turn on him, because you did have Jin captured, or not Jin, you had the uncle captured by the Mongol leader, and I can't remember his name. He's the Khan, essentially.
Kogan Khan.
Yes, yeah. He was telling the uncle that like, hey, yeah, your nephew's out here stabbing our men in their backs and doing all these different things.
And he's like, I thought Jin would never do that.
Yeah, he was like, Jin would never do that. I was thinking that clash would happen earlier in the story, and so to see that you get past Act 1 and you see them kind of confront it, but then be like the uncle's like, all right, you did what you did to save me, but this stops now. Like, we're gonna fight honorable going forward, and to see that continue, I thought that was very compelling and very satisfying to see. That like toward the end, that's where we actually like that's where lines are drawn, and they're like, all right, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I was with you, Blessed. I was worried that it was going to be Khan would tell him that, I would show up to save him, and that's when there'd be this big blow up between us in a relationship I already kind of I liked, from the little bit I had seen. So I was happy you didn't do that, Nate. Good job.
When we were casting Shimura, the scene that we wrote was effectively a scene we've all seen before, where a father finds like a bag of marijuana in the kid's drawer.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you did a little weird thing, and I think your image might have
froze
froze for a second. But right now, it
Oh,
looks
no,
like
now
I'm in the
he's
middle of an
gone.
awesome drum solo.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
now
right,
you're
he's
back.
back now.
Okay, all right, great. So that moment where a dad's like, "What is this? Are you smoking dope? I need you to be better than this. You can be better than this. This is not. There's no future in this." And the kid's like, "It's no big deal." Of course, for
I'm
us,
Jin
it was,
Sakai, no big deal.
Yeah, they all talk like that. But it was. He finds that he had some poison that he had been using, and the tone was just a father who's trying to save his son from going down the drain, even though it's not he wants to redeem his son in a format that he believes is the most important. And Shimura even is a way of talking about the repercussions of doing these sort of things. If you unleash poison and give it out to everybody, that means that chaos is going to take over the island, that anyone could just put a little bit in somebody else's drink, and it's just lawlessness. And so there are reasons for rules in society. Part of that, of course, is just keeping the people in power, which is sort of a counter argument. In some ways, the samurai are the bad guys of the game, really, because they're trying to defend the status quo in that last third. And Jin is saying, what's more important, the status quo or everyone's freedom? And that's where the clash comes in.
Something I found interesting, and it was something I felt early on, but definitely by the end, I believe. Maybe it's my own interpretation. But, we talked about, you guys finished Infamous, and you're like, well, we just need to do something that's not Infamous. Even talking about it here with the poison, talking about the character development, talking about becoming the ghost, did you at any point stop and go, oh man, we're making another comic book game. We're making a superhero game here, right? Because Tam from GameSpot put up the thing today. He's like, this is just a Batman game. And I was like, I love it. And it was him spinning the camera, the cape in the wind. I saw so many pangs of the comic book stuff we've talked about before about Infamous here, of this storytelling of, you think you're doing the right thing, but that actually makes your villains, right? And that being with the poison here, that, Jin introduces this, but then it starts to get mass produced and it's going to be used all over the place. The battle between him and his father, the abilities you do get. As somebody who honestly, I think knows that I had no affection. I also didn't hate it or anything, but I had no love for samurai genre before this. Now I do, and I want to get a list of stuff from you by the end of the show to go watch or read, to get to the end of this and have it me be like, oh man, this was a Batman story. Like, Jin for me feels like Batman. Is that just a hero's tale to you, Nate? Is that something you think you brought over from Infamous? Is that just something that samurai stories are that I didn't know?
No, I don't think that's common to samurai stories. This sort of transformation from samurai to ghost is it's not intentionally meant to be a superhero feeling story. It's meant to just be one of transformation. There is this idea of who you are. We knew you wanted to be a samurai first, right? And then who's the ghost? The ghost is somebody who uses fear as a weapon. He's somebody that goes beyond the traits and the skills and the moral boundaries that a samurai is. And also is like a larger than life figure to the people of the island, sort of a tall tale.
Yeah.
And that transformation, becoming this larger than life person, is something that I think would happen in the year 1274. If you really slew 300 Mongols, people would think that lightning bolts would shoot out of your eyes, that you could breathe fire, that you're an inhuman monster. And that is how you're meant to feel, right? That the people of the island start thinking of you as larger than life. The Mongols, if they see you kill one of their brothers, they fall over and they run because they're so scared of the ghost. It's not really a superhero story, but it is one of you becoming legendary in this very small world of Tsushima Island.
Yeah, and I think
plus
you do
I made
that
all
so
those
well.
infamous games, so maybe I just can't help but do it.
No, honestly, one of the the funniest moments in the game is such a throwaway line on, I think it's a side quest. If not, it's just you're with a bunch of dudes running on a mission or whatever, and at some point one of them puts together that you're the ghost, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're the ghost!" And Jin's like, "Yeah, some people call me that." And he's like, "But you're not 10 feet tall. You're not shooting fire out of your eyes or whatever." And I was like, "Oh my God, I love that little bit of it." Right.
Speaking of being larger than life, I would be remiss if I did not ask this. What was up with the Tengu? Was that an actual Tengu or was that a person in a Tengu mask? Because I genuinely do not know.
Ah, right. This is the demon longbow mission.
Yes.
When you get the bow, you are meant to be drugged, and this is your hallucination. Now, but the thing is that everybody on this island believes in these things. So while this is a completely grounded game, from Jin's point of view, that was real.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
Because he's kind of tripping, right? And this dude in the Tingo mask has been haunting him this whole time, right? Threatening him. He looks kind of scary. And then he comes at him while Jin's kind of in this state. And unto Jin, this is a real event, but it is a man in a mask.
So you mentioned it was grounded, and like that was one of the things that's, as I was playing that game, I kind of like years of samurai video games kind of factored into my head of like, I'm kind of waiting for the drop of when the mythical aspects of it have like kind of come in. Even though I knew this was not that kind of game, I had just played Neo. I had played I played every other video game about a samurai in my life, and those always have some degree of like yokai or something. At what point did you decide like, no, we're not doing that for this one? This is just a samurai human story.
From the very beginning, we were not going to have any monsters. It's just because we wanted to go after that classic samurai movie experience. Simple as that.
So with this game being a samurai game, what does representation look like as far as like people working on it? Because I know a lot of the cast, or not, I mean probably all the cast, are like Asian representative, right?
Yes.
Were there people on like the writing team or on the development team that were also either Japanese or Asian, or people that you guys consulted with, where that came into play with the samurai aspects of the game?
Sure. Well, we definitely wanted to have an all Asian cast for sure. It was as many people of Japanese descent as possible, particularly if they had some cultural knowledge of how to stand or how to kind of interact with one another in a way that would deliver a feeling of authenticity. But to create the feeling of authenticity from day one, all of us at Sucker Punch, who were raised inside of an American kind of cultural backdrop, we knew we were just going to fail at that. Absolutely. So we had to reach out to experts who came in to tell us about religious beliefs at the time, costumes, how people held their swords, how to use their swords, mannerisms. Fortunately, we're members of the PlayStation family, so Japan Studios was super duper helpful to us. They took us on research trips to Tsushima Island and around Japan itself to do things like look at how blacksmithing worked at the time. And they even went so far as to do audio recordings for us for like deer and insects. Having these experts come in early and repeatedly while we're making the game, telling us where we're going wrong, that was key. And without them, we would have not been able to produce the level of authenticity we did. And while, it's not perfect by any stretch, it's us doing our damnedest to try to do right by people who are very familiar with these period sword drama films, so that when they play the game, they're not kind of tossed out of it by something being off.
When the idea gets going and you to kick them all around and that gets thrown out there, was there a knee-jerk reaction of maybe we shouldn't try doing that because it is so far from what we know? Because again, like, the last game is in Seattle. You can look out your window for reference material, right? Whereas this one is across the globe in another country, in another hemisphere, like all these different parts to it. Like, or was it you wanted that level of challenge from the get-go?
You just wanted to play an open world samurai game first and foremost. That
Like
was
nobody
a
else
game
is
you've been
making it, we
waiting
will.
for somebody to make. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how game makers make their choices. What do they want to play? And just one of the hurdles for making this game is like being real upfront about what you don't know, just being honest. And so we went into it with eyes open, knowing that our little community of Sucker Punch was inadequate to doing this. And, you know, I'm so glad. Like, we'd be down on the mocap stage doing a scene, and we had a motion advisor there on every shoot, and we'd be blocking in a scene, and I wouldn't know when she would tap me on the shoulder, but she would all the time and say, that's not how they'd be holding their sake glass. She'd show the actors, and then we'd all hold it the way she told us, trying to always do it right. And it's not clear when you're going to go wrong. So you really have to have somebody there with you, you know, holding our hand to make it feel correct.
Did you end up doing a bunch of independent research? And by independent research, I mean watch a bunch of samurai stuff.
Yeah. Definitely have watched a lot of samurai movies and read a lot of samurai comics. Have you guys ever read the comic Usagi Yojimbo?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Is that one I gotta put? Is that one of the ones?
Oh,
I'm gonna open up
I love
Comixology.
Usagi Yojimbo. So the guy who wrote that, Stan Sakai, the name of Jin Sakai is the hat because I love those comics so much. They are loosely based off Miyamoto Musashi's kind of Wandering. And I started reading them when I was working on dialogue for the Sly Cooper series, because Usagi Yojimbo is about anthropomorphized animals, except for they treat each other with the utmost respect. And I just really got into it. So I would recommend that.
Okay.
It was definitely
How
like,
did I even get onto that? Sorry, I start talking about Usagi, I get super psyched.
as somebody, I've watched a bunch of samurai TV shows and stuff like Usagi Yojimbo and like Tezuka's old manga and stuff like that. And this game definitely seemed inspired by that in the sense of the episodic side quest of like you go somewhere, there's a title card, and you do the thing like a lone wolf and cub where they would just kind of wander into a town, solve the thing, and then they just go on to the next town. So was that all a direct inspiration?
Absolutely. I was just looking. Oh yeah, see, I just have it right by my.
No.
Yeah.
Like it, without question, it's perfect, right? The wandering samurai goes into towns. There's always some trouble brewing, and they take care of business. It's very friendly to an open world format.
Right.
Shout out to all these being on Comixology Unlimited too. We're not sponsored, but hey, that's cool. $10. I can read all this stuff. That's great. Putting it all on my list here, my cart. So in that vein, then, is that how you looked at your side quests? Like when you know, like you said, from basically your day 2, right? You have the sentence of what's going to happen and what this journey is. You can see the arc for Jin there. Is it then how, you want to pull from something like Lone Wolf and Cub, like Imran's talking about, for your side quest, that you come in and it's going to be this contained thing for the most part, unless it's one of the obviously character tales that's going on with like Sensei or whatever. But the other ways around it is you wanted it to be just this, here's this episode, here's like a taste of what's happening on the island.
Absolutely. I like to think of the game like a tree. So you've got Jin's transformation story, which is like the trunk. Then there are these branches that come off of it, which are the tales of the characters you meet along the way, Lady Masako, Sensei Ishikawa. And then there are other branches that come off of that are their own stories. And it's meant to be an anthology of stories in the game. It's not really just Jin's story. Jin's story is a fractionally small part of it. We built the game with the idea that there would be other things going on, and that would actually be the more important thing for you to deal with, so that players would find themselves just going off over the hill and getting lost in Tsushima.
I think it works.
It's funny you guys mentioned like being paranoid of the uncle before, because I was paranoid of everybody else, that they were going to betray me at some point. So when Masako did betray me, I was like, I knew it was going to happen. Then they got over it real quick. But like the entire time with Ishikawa, I was like, what is his deal? What is he not telling me? And it turned out he just didn't tell me things because he's a cranky old man.
So
Yeah, I
were
think-
there
Go
were
for
there
it.
were there other open world games that you guys look to as inspiration for how you're going to structure this one? Because I know for me, when as I was playing through, I was like, man, I'm getting feels of like Breath of the Wild. I know Imran was referencing like Witcher a lot and Assassin's Creed a lot, and like were there games that you guys were like, all right, these are what we see as, you know, the quintessential open world games, the open world games that we love, that we took after.
Right. So the two games that I'd say are most impactful when we started, the game Red Dead Redemption did, in my opinion, just a magnificent job letting players into the boots of an outlaw cowboy. It felt like a cowboy simulator. The costumes, Marston's story, the environments, the music, it put you there in that environment. And I felt like it wasn't just about his story, but there were a lot of stories to find all around the Old West. Mm-hmm. So early on, when I'd be pitching people and trying to get them excited about the game, I'd just say, look, we're making Red Dead Samurai. And then instantly people would get it. They would say, oh yeah, all right, I get it. I'm going to be a samurai and we're going to reproduce the feel of feudal Japan. Oh, let's make it. So that was absolutely a cornerstone for us in making this game. The next one is totally Breath of the Wild. This idea that the landscape has an incredible character and mystery to it. And there's a feeling of personal agency, of just saying, I'm going to ignore what this game might be telling me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. And the game will reward you for that. Another game that I think does this really well is Skyrim. I couldn't even tell you what the main plot of Skyrim is because I constantly get lost in all of the things to do. And I love the game for it. It's amazing. That's why our game is meant to be an anthology of stories, not just jamming down Jin's transformation arc.
Yeah, I think, you know, people who want a golden path that I think lose a lot for that, right? Like, I think that totally. For even I think I was reading a subreddit thread that I haven't been representing myself as well as I thought I was in some of it, but like even for us, where when it came time for me, like, oh man, the review's coming up, I need to turn on the jets and actually make sure I'm playing the thing. Like, it didn't lose something for me, but I loved so much that first week with the game where I was like, I'm just going to do everything or anything and, you know, ride in one direction and think I'm going to where this question mark over here. But then, you know, the bird passes and I'm like, oh, wait, this isn't going the same direction. I'll follow that to something brand new that I didn't know was over here.
Yeah, totally. Do you guys ever go on vacation to a city, you know, before quarantine that you don't know and you don't have a plan? You just start walking because you're in like Rome or something and you're like, I think I'll have a coffee, and you go into a coffee and you come out and you see something down the way and you just go where your feet take you.
Yeah.
I find that to be the most fun. Like it is real world video games for me. And I think in Ghost of Tsushima, when you have the experience that you just described, Greg, where the bird takes you over here and then you see a column of steam from a hot spring, but on the way somebody's yelling out for help and you just kind of pinball from one thing to another. That's where the game's at its best. Yeah. Because it's solidly just your choices.
Is that where the diegetic stuff came from, as far as, you know, the wind pointing you to your waypoint, the birds, you know, guiding you to something cool, or like the fox dens, you know, the fox is leading you to the shrines and all these different things that appear in the world naturally, as opposed to like just through, let's say, like a mini map or something like that?
You've totally nailed it. We had all the kind of standard UI when we started the game, but I found like when you're riding towards the dot in the middle of your UI and it's just counting down the meters till you get there, you're not really looking at the world at all. You're not present in the moment. Yep. But when we turn that stuff off and you just kind of know the overall direction, suddenly you're looking and you start noticing stuff around you. And then we can use those diegetic elements like a column of smoke telling you that the Mongols are burning something. It just makes the world suddenly something for you to discover and participate in, instead of just min-maxing your passage through space.
I got a controversial question for you.
Yes.
Why is there no lock-on in the game?
Oh, like here we go. Here we go.
Like, this is one of my few big complaints with the game, is that there is not a lock-on. It doesn't like at the start of the game, I found it to be more of a problem than it became like an hour in the game. Like at a certain point, I got very used to it, and I was like, okay, you know what, this is not as bad as I thought it was at the beginning. But was there a specific reason why you guys decided, hey, let's not go for a lock-on?
So, in looking at classic samurai films, it's very frequently one guy against a big group, unless it's a duel. And when he's fighting a big group, he's moving from one enemy to another, dancing between their blades. And that was the feeling we wanted to get, especially since your enemies are the Mongols, which are known for large numbers. So we very purposely did not do a lock-on so that players would get into a rhythm of attacking this guy and then bouncing to this guy and then dodging this guy and then going back in, so that you had awareness of all of them in trying to defeat the group.
Makes sense.
In duels,
Makes sense.
we do lock on to the enemy because there's only one person and we know you really want to square up on them and see their every move. But when it's a group, we wanted you to have situational awareness.
So you kind of mentioned why Tsushima for this one, because it was about the Mongol invasion. Was there ever any thought of was someone ever going like, hey, what about Tokyo? What about Kyoto? Like other places, and not to commit you to anything in the future, but it's like, would there ever be any thought about going to those places in the future?
Oh, right now we are just completely preoccupied with getting Ghost of Tsushima patched up as much as possible based on some of the feedback we've got from some reviewers or just our own QA testers since the game went out for production. So that's what we're doing right now. I would be very excited to make more samurai adventures in the future, but there's nothing right now that I could just say yes.
But if you had a personal choice, where would you want one to be?
Well, we gotta go to Kyoto at some point, right? Who from the game was gonna go there? I did a bunch of side quests, right? And I saw
Yuna
someone
wanted to go to Kyoto.
It was Yuna, right? No, somebody wanted to go somewhere else and start something.
She wanted to get off the island.
Was it was it Tomo? Did Tomo want to go? Was she going Kyoto and she might start some business? I thought somebody wanted to go somewhere and start a business in Kyoto.
Kenji?
No,
You wanna open up,
Kenji's
like,
with
a
me forever.
brewery?
All right, Kenji's my boy forever. Don't try to take him away from me. Doesn't matter. Sorry, I totally sidetracked the conversation.
I don't know where we would go next.
Yeah,
I look forward to the challenge. I'll tell you that.
How do you? This is always a question I like asking developers, Nate. You've worked on this game for years. It's finally reviewed, and then literally as of us recording this, it comes out tomorrow, right? Like, how do you then deal with us immediately going, can we have more? There's a question in the comments from Kuchoko who's like, is there any plans for DLC? Are you just like, I just finished this, please let me. It's not even finished, we're working on it. Like, is that heartwarming that we want more immediately, or is it completely frustrating that we're not happy that we already have what we have?
Oh, I could not be happier that people are interested in more.
Okay.
Without question. I mean, we've been working on this game for so long, and it is a little tiring, as you might imagine. But the last thing I would want is for somebody to get it and be like, and that's enough. I mean, that's a heartbreaker.
Right here, I'm gonna insert a word from our sponsor.
Nice. Are you gonna use a British accent?
Do you want me to do the ad in a British accent?
Yes.
No.
All right,
please,
Kevin, remind me.
no.
Kevin, remind me at the end of
No.
this. I got it, Kevin. When we record these at the end and then insert them right here, I got to do it in a British accent. So, ladies and gentlemen,
British accent.
here's the ad with a British accent. I don't know if I can keep it up. There's two ads, Nate. I don't know if I can do my terrible British accent for that long.
The sponsors are gonna like that.
It's also a very good point.
So speaking of DLC, actually, not to interrupt you, Greg, I apologize.
Please go for it.
But so toward I think it was toward Act 3. So during Act 2, toward the end, when I think this is when Jin was either in prison or there was a certain point where I was like, Jin's not gonna make it out, and the buck is gonna get passed on to Yuna, and Yuna's gonna be the main character.
I also thought that.
Really?
Yeah, legit. Yeah. I was like, oh, Yuna's gonna become the Ghost of Tsushima. I was convinced at a certain point until it didn't happen. But that did make me think of DLC and future games and possibly playing as other characters. Is that something that you guys ever thought of, or something that came up, the idea of switching characters, or even what might a future game be like without Jin?
Well, we're just not at a point where we're working on a future game right now. But I mean, I definitely think of Yuna as being another ghost for sure. In the game, she and Jin are partners, and she's as capable, and she's right there with them. So it's not crazy at all that you thought that. I mean, we definitely wanted it to feel like she is just right there with her, his sword, because she's the one that he trusts with it. And she could use it if he's not coming back. So I don't think it's a crazy thought at all. But as for, like details, I don't have any.
No, yeah. I have a question in a similar vein in terms of things that wouldn't have made it, right? Earlier we were talking about fighting. So we're talking about fighting in a group. We're talking about obviously calling it for a standoff, the one-on-one duels. Were there other things? I think it's interesting because, when we watched that state of play and had all this dropped on us and you're seeing it all, you're like, oh my gosh, there's all these different mechanics and ways you're fighting. Were there ones that you were doing earlier on that either got cut for content or weren't as much fun, or were there other things like that, or were these the core the whole way through?
This was the core the whole way through. We knew that a katana-based combat was like the absolute dead center of the experience. When you think about being a samurai, you think about getting in sword fights. So we started early and we never stopped working on that. And it took a fair amount of work, animation, to get it to where it was. Other aspects of it, like duels or standoffs, are kind of satellites to that base experience of just being surrounded by enemies with your sword out and having to dance between their swords.
In a similar question, talk to me a little bit about things in the open world. Like, we talked a lot about it. Me and Imran have the platinum because we're really good gamers. Blessing, too young, doesn't understand how to hold a controller. Can't platinum a game.
Exactly. I mean, it's true.
But one of the things that I was talking about, right?
So you have the armor then.
Oh yeah. The iridescent. What's it? It's like, you know the colors. It's all super colorful and cool.
Yeah. I will tell you that was the very last thing we added into the game because we didn't feel like we rewarded people enough with platinum.
Sure.
And so we scrambled to make this armor dye variant just so we could say thank you for getting to this point. Hopefully it is loud enough and vibrant enough to warrant all of your hard work, guys.
I remember getting the platinum in Second Son, and then Delson saying like, "Hey, we spent too much time together." So I'm glad in this one, like the game actually kind of thanks me for getting the platinum. You're like, "Oh, good. I don't feel bad about this."
See, the platinum, the platinum itself is the reward. I didn't need the armor. I appreciate it. I thank you for it. But my real memories, or what the real treasure was, the memories I made along the way. Like, you don't have to worry about that. I get the end there. But the question for you was, when you're doing all the open world stuff, and we're talking about, bamboo strikes, we're talking about the hot tubs, we're talking about the fox dens. Were there other ones of those that you tried that didn't make it? I know one of the things that I've talked about, is like at the end trying to platinum it when it is just like, okay, I've done all the missions. It was like, all right, 40 some fox dens, and I still have 15 left or whatever. Were there other things you wanted to put in there that it didn't work or didn't come together?
Not really. Those little kind of collectible mini games. I mean, they're not even really mini games. They're so small. Those are meant to just accent the feeling of the time and place, to give you these moments to either drink in nature or just focus on what is it to do a sweet sword slash. And it's just about that. I love them. And I certainly, with another year of development, would have made a lot more, but we didn't just have some kind of waiting around that we didn't use.
Sure. That makes sense. One of the things I do want to do too is I want to compliment you on the fox den that we show up to and it's been like ravaged. There's like a dead fox there. Like, I thought that was a nice because it happened deep enough where I was in the rhythm of getting them, and I'm like, all right, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna chase the little guy over there or whatever. And it was I appreciated that one, shaking it up. I appreciated that the fox dens would also intersect with like standoffs or fights or whatever, where it was like it wasn't just chasing this fox every time. There were things that shook it up somewhere along the One question I want to get in here too before we get into anything else, or a whole bunch of different stuff still happening here. But we talked about obviously the beginning of this. You want to do a samurai game. You want to do something completely different, and then also obviously you want to make it as authentic as possible, as respectful as possible. You bring in all these representatives both from Sony Japan and just experts and all that stuff. All that said, and all the work that went into doing this game correctly and not having it be, hit and be hollow or hit and just be completely off the mark, does that make the Famitsu review all the better? I mean, it's here we are. You have this perfect score from them, right? It's like you're the third Western game, right, to earn a perfect score from Famitsu. Like, that's incredible, right? Because I mean, Famitsu is video game reviewing in Japan, right? What was that like?
When I learned about that, I felt relieved. We wanted so much to just do right by Japanese gamers and to not make something that would kick them out of the fantasy, and to get told, you did it, guys. You put in the homework. It felt great, but I just didn't want to screw it up, man.
I'm sure. Yeah, that would have been a problem.
It's not just, I shouldn't say I don't want to screw it up. I mean, the whole team doesn't want to screw it up. We worked hard to look at everything we could, architecture, how boats were made, all that stuff. And I shouldn't say it was hard. It was actually one of the great joys of making the game. We've never made anything like this where every day you're learning. People came to Sucker Punch because they were excited about working on a game set in feudal Japan. So you get in there, and now it's your job to figure out how to model the Sashamono banner. People were psyched to do it because they were interested in the time.
They've come up by name, but talk to me a little bit about the cast of characters here that were like Jin's team. Like, I think I was caught off guard by how much I liked Sensei Ishikawa. Lady Masuko, her entire storyline I thought was fantastic. We talked a second ago about having to fight her. I did not expect to have to fight her. And when we did have to fight her, it was another one similar for me with Uncle, where I'm like, this sucks. I like you, but don't make me. And so that at the end, when you beat her and it's just like, don't try to kill me again. She's like, I won't. I'm like, I love this relationship. I love that that's how it ends. I'm like, don't try to betray me again. You got it. Let's go do this. Like, where do they enter the picture in terms of, obviously, you're making an open world game. You have the main quest of Jin stuff here. How do you start coming up with those characters then that are going to accent this story?
So we knew that the trunk of the tree was that transformation of Jin from samurai to ghost, and all of the other characters are just satellites around that. So the two easy examples there are Shimura exists in the story to say, you are screwing up, Jin. You have to stay to the course. Yuna exists in the story to say, I'm going to challenge the status quo. You should do what actually helps the people of the island. So you can see how those two are pushing and pulling on him. Now, Lady Masako is the embodiment of just fury and revenge. She's going out there, and we internally call her Murder Grandma, because she just is out for blood. And you can see it's like a cautionary tale. Should Jin just let fury take him, he will be like her. Ishikawa has a relationship with Tomoe, which is very similar to Jin's relationship with his uncle. So you're seeing a mirror of what could happen to Jin with his uncle through the lens of Ishikawa and Tomoe that hopefully lets you think about a future with Jin differently. All of the characters are just there for that reason.
Speaking of Tomoe, so I feel like this may be a thing you'll tell me is up to my interpretation, but was she actually like captured by the Mongols and forced to work for them, or was she doing it voluntarily?
She was captured.
Okay. I'm actually really glad there's an answer to that. Because I spent that entire time like being suspicious of both of them, and I figured like at some point they would make me choose. I'm like, I didn't want to choose because it's got to be one of them's right, and not both of them. But good to know.
Shout out to Lady Masako. Some of my favorite screenshots I've taken in the photo mode in the game. We got to talk about photo mode also, but I've been trying to do some like character portrait screenshots, and I have like up close ones with Lady Masako with like her sword, like obviously ready to kill. That I love that I haven't posted yet because the game hasn't come out, and I don't want to like do like character spoilers for anybody. But Nate, for you, do you have a favorite character in the game?
Ooh.
My favorite is Uncle Shimura. I just love that guy. I want to please him. That's why I kill him at the end, because I like him so much. He's my favorite. He's the samurai ideal that I know I'm not to measure up to.
Can you talk about the photo mode a bit? Because I know for me and for quite a few other people who I've seen like tweeting about it and talking about it, like I'm absolutely in love with the photo mode. It's probably my favorite photo mode in a game. And I think a big part of that is the fact that you guys have the animated environment thing where when you pause for the photo mode, the grass is still flowing, the wind's still going, and the particles are still going. What was the thought process into putting together this photo mode?
Just to take advantage of the beauty of Tsushima. I mean, so much effort has gone into creating that dynamic world and the particles that go along with it. So why not let players participate in that act of creation?
And I think that's brilliant. I think that, I mean, for photo modes in general, I'm always a fan. But like, so some of them are, I don't want to say bare bones, but some of them are as simple as just like, all right, cool, your color and contrast, is the character there? Are they not there? I think not even just the fact that they can be animated in this, it's the fact that you can change them. You can go through and cycle what particle you want. You can, make it from nothing to all. It's crazy in there. Yeah. The, different filters, dropping color, taking color, the rolls, the text, like, yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah, whether all the options there, I feel like are super good in terms of creating your own scene. And like the world itself is just it's very visually stunning in a way that like every few minutes in the game I'd want to pause to get into photo mode. Yeah. And so like actually for you, I want to talk about that actually, because the environment in the game is probably my other like favorite thing about Ghost of Tsushima. How visually diverse it is and varied and colorful and vibrant. What inspired you guys to go that direction with it?
Well, I give full props to Jason Connell, who directed all of that. And I think he is a genius. He and I are both huge fans of samurai cinema. And he correctly kind of eyeballed how Spartan things were and how clean they were. And so I'll never forget, because the thing that really made it clear for me was the team was going to make a fern forest. And he had a picture of what a real fern forest is. It would have a fern with a tree and maybe like a bush with like some brown coming off of it. And that's what photorealistic forest is. And then he had another picture, which was just fern. That's all it was. And it's not as realistic because there's not the diversity that you would see in real life. But it's such a strong, powerful statement about just this is a place with visual identity through a very steady color that almost becomes a landmark in the space. And as you move from a huge clump of ferns to a big, rich bamboo forest, which is bamboo, right? It's not ferns plus bamboo. You get a strong sense of variation and also like core identity. And that Spartanness is what makes the environment so alive to me. And, the Sucker Punch art team, I don't know how they do it, to be honest. I'm not a member of that team. I wish I was as good as them. They're the best.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, obviously, since State of Play, I think, when you guys really got to give a giant presentation of this game and have it go out there, it was shown there, but then to live it, for 50 some hours, maybe 60, I don't even know. I think the game is so visually stunning, and I love the style the game exudes, right? Like, I feel it's to your point that I think, you're in these things and it's like these colors are otherworldly, but they also are completely fitting for the island and what they're doing in a way that I'm right there with everybody. Even if I wasn't taking the photo, the amount of times I would stop on a cliff's edge or ride into a new thing and just take it in, or, back to the very beginning of this show, talking about your journey with your horse and who Jin is and how he non-verbally communicates stuff, riding through the flowers and seeing him dip his hand just to pet the tops of them as I was like, oh my God, like, there's a world here, right? And it's like you guys created this thing and everything fits inside of it, if that makes sense. While we're talking about the art team and other weird things, finish the game. You know, this is again the first time we get to talk about any stuff. It's super exciting. You finish the game. You're in Jin's house, his little ghost bat cave or whatever you want to call it, and you're looking through all his memories, right, and going through everything from the journey you just did. I also noticed a bunch of origami pieces that seemed a little different. Can you explain that if people haven't seen these? Because it's very easy to miss.
So those are very small shout outs to other Sony game development studios. You pick them up and look at them, and they are different elements from other games that are made by our sister studios. That's
awesome. I love cool. The little Easter eggs. I love that it's held to the end, because obviously in the middle of it, if I would have picked up Ratchet's face, I would have been like, what the hell is this? But like at the end, as I'm like, it's this weird juxtaposition for me, because it's this awesome thing of all these little Sony Easter eggs that I think you can blow right past. And then also Jin going through and picking up like the straw hat, right? And remembering Rizu, right? We haven't even talked about Ryoga. Yeah. Like we haven't even talked about like that journey and what that relationship and friendship was like. Like then to have these little things there as a nod to us, the player, as we've, if you want it to be, you're at the end of your journey, or if you want to be, a real cool gamer like me and Imran, go get the platinum. You know what I mean? Not be a coward.
One day I'm gonna get it. I really did. I didn't know about the origami thing until you brought it up just now, and I really thought you were about to be like, oh yeah, and there's this Easter egg for Paper Mario and the Origami King in there. I was like, oh yeah.
So I looked at it at first. I was like, I wonder if this is an infamous Second Son reference because of the paper stuff in that game. And I was like, no, I actually recognize the shapes of it. I could tell what this is. It's like it was a cool moment for that.
Yeah. Yeah, do we want to bring up any of the other stuff? I know, Blessing, you wanted to talk about at one point the death of Taka, right? Like, I mean, him picking up his sword, right? And this like brutal thing where I was like, don't do it. And then he grabs it. Even Jin's looking at him like, don't do it. And he turns around, tries to get the con, gets knocked out.
I was pissed off at him because I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Just like run away and get help. Go get Yuna. That will help much more than what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by the amount of like fates and the amount of, I guess, character journeys in the main story that I found myself like super engaged with, that I didn't realize I was engaged with until they had those moments, like the Taka moment we were talking about, but also what's his name? We just mentioned him, Ryogu or something like that.
Ryuzo.
Yes, like when you get into the duel with him, when you're infiltrating the castle in Act 1, legit I got chills like when that face off happened. Legit the whole time, like as they're building up to the duel, I was like, no, please, no. And then when you get into the duel and I'm like, I guess we're doing this, bro. I guess this is happening.
Well, for me, it was like, when he didn't show up, right? When him and the Straw Hats didn't show up, I didn't jump to, they're betraying us. I was like, they're going to come in at the last second and save the day. Like they're running late. They got whatever. They're still coming. And then to get there and have them have flipped, I was like, holy shit. Yeah. And then to have that throughout the way. And I thought his story was so well done. Again, back to my personal push that this is a superhero game, right? Like a villain created by Jin doing what he thinks is right, with just living his life, right? He is a samurai. He wanted to become a samurai too, so he had to win that duel, right? Whereas he's like, no, you didn't. You couldn't. That was my one chance, and you fucked me over. You were going to be fine regardless. You could have taken the L. And it's like, that's a really interesting chip to have on your shoulder for that long, and see where that journey led him, and now it blowing up in our face about it. And so, yeah.
I'm so glad you guys were paying attention to those conversations when they're just riding on horses.
Oh, yeah.
You're picking it all up. I mean, that's the history. And certainly when we're making the game, we wanted to show people doing noble actions and doing selfish actions. And when people fall down like that, it's for a good reason, right? Trying to stay alive in this really crummy situation.
I did like how Ryozo, he didn't want to seem to fight Jin because he knew he would lose. And like the time you do fight him, he's kind of resigned to it and be like, well, I guess we're doing this. Maybe I'll have a shot, maybe not. But like every time you see him talking to Koten Khan before then, he's saying like, yeah, nobody can beat him. I don't know what you think you're doing, but just sending swordsmen out after him is not going to work.
No. Do you know that scene where Koten Khan is kind of mentally dominating Ryuzo, and he makes Ryuzo burn some peasants alive to intimidate the people in Castle Shimura. To me, that is one of the best moments with Ryuzo, because even though he just betrayed you, you suddenly feel sympathy for him because he made a bad choice and now he's suffering it, having to do horrible things because he made his bed and he has to sleep in it. To me, that it really changed my feelings about him, because he wasn't. I felt a lot of sympathy for him, I guess. Mm-hmm. It had flipped it around.
Yeah, the way he does it and then collapses, you know what I mean? Like when he doesn't have to do it again. Like I'm right there with you. And again, it's in the same vein as Uncle, where I like you. I understand why you're like this and where we are and how we got here. You know what I mean? It's not like you did this and twirled your evil mustache. You did this because of what you thought you had to do to survive and what you had to do for the Straw Hats, right? Because he's doing it for them. They're starving. They have no food.
That was my big thing throughout the story, is that, and aside from the Mongols, pretty much everybody is doing what they're doing because they see either the good in it or the value in it. And so, like, you know, when it came to him, you know, burning the bodies in front of the castle, right, to intimidate them, it was when he started breaking down and being like, just please just open the door. That's when I was like, okay, I'm feeling this sympathy now. Like I understand where you're coming from, even though, you know, what you did was pretty objectively evil. Like you're doing it because you're not seeing another way forward. You don't necessarily have hope that Jin's gonna be able to take back the island.
I was on the same side until like Jin kept giving him chances to like join us, and he kept going, "Nah, I'm good. Like I'm already too far." It's like, no, really, you're losing. Just back off for a minute. You'll be fine.
Yeah, that kind of also adds to the cons, like how intimidating he is. Because for me, when we do that first storm on the castle to take him out, and like he ends up throwing Jin over the bridge into the water, I think that set him up as a very kind of a scary villain. Legit, I was like, oh snap, this guy seems like he's going to be a force to reckon with. So like the build up throughout the game of him, like continually, like I guess thwarting his power and continually like, you know, establishing that he is the Khan, he is here to fuck shit up. I mean, I thought the game did a pretty good job of that, and yeah, toward the end, the satisfaction of having that face off with him and having that wave based kind of combat like boss battle at the end of it, felt satisfying.
Man, I failed you. The running joke with Patrick, the guy who played the Khan, I feel like maybe 8 times in the story, he tries to convince the people of Japan, of Tsushima, be it Uncle Shimura or Jin on that bridge before he throws him off. He's constantly trying to get the people of Tsushima to surrender so he doesn't have to hurt anyone else. He's going to intimidate them, but he wants them to throw down their arms so there'll be no more bloodshed. And
he's being very scary about it, though.
Very. Oh no, for sure. I mean, he will destroy you. But part of why he wants to intimidate you is so that you'll just stop. To me, that is what I really like about him, is that he's sort of unnervingly logical in what he's saying. And I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that everybody would have been better off if, you know, they just laid down their arms. So many more people would be alive. Of course, Tsushima would now be part of the Mongol Empire, so that's its own problem. But I feel like he's got a pretty reasonable argument.
That's crazy talk. He's an invader. Get off my island. You know what I mean?
You show like early, like the very first scene with him is him like just burning Adachi with a torch. It's like, okay, that's not a thing a good person does.
I mean, but like Jin poison folks. Like Jin did a lot.
He had to. He was backed into a corner. Blessing.
Well, so was the Khan.
It becomes that thing of like every game for like 10 years, the final boss would say, "We're not so different, you and I." I'm very glad they didn't actually say that in this game. It was implied, but it was good the line didn't actually come out.
We learned this from you, the poison.
It all goes back to you, Jin. You're the mistake. You're the problem.
Well, I mean, like from a narrative perspective, the fact that Jin always felt like he was a loaded gun where someone's like has their finger on the trigger the entire time, like to the point where mechanics of that game feel like that, like the standoff specifically. That as it kept going through the narrative, I'm like, okay, y'all are just standing in front of a loaded gun at this point. This is kind of on you.
Yeah, the standoff thing was interesting for me because I think, in the beginning, I was doing them fine, but like somewhere by the end of Act 1, I would be interested to know if there is a gameplay mechanic in your head, Nate, for this, but it was that at some point, the fact that you hold triangle and release triangle to do the move, somewhere between it stopped feeling active to me and more passive, as if there was this like wall of force that I was barely holding back, and then I'm given the second to unleash it. It didn't feel like I was doing it as much as I was getting out of its way, like I was pulling the cork out of a champagne bottle and letting gin explode.
Oh yeah, totally. I think that's the intention. For all of our other attacks, you hit the button and the thing happens.
Yeah.
But for that one, you press the button and then you're waiting, and there's like a actual physical tension on your finger while you're doing it.
Yeah.
I know it's not a big deal, but you are holding down the button and you're waiting to release the sword out of its sheath, release the button. And it's tense, right? The camera's pulling back while it's getting narrower. So it feels like you're getting a little bit of vertigo. The guy moves a little bit and you don't want to take the bait. And then he really moves and you have to do it. You have to move your hand back, as Jin does the same thing with his arm, to try and make you as sympathetic to the exact moment of what Jin's doing.
Yeah, early on in the game, I was like, oh, this is easy. I'm going to be able to do this for everybody. Like, why even bother to fight them? I'll just stand them all off. Then by the third act, I was like, I'm not going to stand anybody off anymore. It's really hard. I'm just going to kill them from a distance with poison or something and not have to actually like deal with that.
Yeah, the amount of times I screwed it up, like into Act 2 and 3, I was like, oh god, I'm like, it's back to what we're talking about. I'm just like, I'm not the Ghost of Tsushima. I'm just a guy who can barely do this standoff right. And then when you nail it, you feel so powerful.
I think that mechanic is probably the most quintessential samurai thing in the game. I mean, that just dead silent tension, waiting for the other guy to move, and then one slash. I love that.
I tried to finish people off in duels with the what was the name? The Heavenly Blow, just because I like the idea of like the slash past the samurai and then watching them slowly fall. Just because that is the samurai thing to me.
Oh, it's so good. Totally, they're dead on their feet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man, I love it.
Nate, one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't ask: was there ever an idea to put a quick change like loadout thing in the game for gear and charms? This is something we were talking about, right? Of like, we were all so obsessed with the game that if I'm riding on the horse, I'm wearing the traveling garb, and then I'd get to a place and it's like, oh, I'm going to switch over to the Sakai armor so I can get a better standoff. And like, you're hopping into a menu and switching your gear, let alone charms I didn't really touch until the very, very end of the game. Was there ever an idea to do something about that?
No, I had never heard that idea until watching your review. And I got to say, it's a really good idea.
Thank you. You're welcome to take it. Put it in a patch. I don't mind. You don't have to call it. You don't even have to put my name on it. It's fine. I won't be offended.
I do want my name on it, though.
Damn it. All right, fine. It's Imran's patch then. Nate, is there anything we haven't talked to you about that you like your first chance to talk on a camera? I think about like what's actually happened in this game. Is there something that you want to ask us? Is there a topic we didn't touch on? Anything like that? A story we need to know?
Yeah, actually, I'm curious. You'd asked me who my favorite character was. Who are your favorite characters and why?
Interesting. I mean, I think it's a cop out, but I love Jin, so I'm going to put that out there. That I totally love Jin. I liked filling in. What it's a game at the end where like you're talking about. I think a lot of people are. I think even Blessing, who had to go get something, is talking about how stoic he was and how he didn't really connect with him. And for me, I think, again, projecting so much superhero Batman Cole on him, you know what I mean? Of getting to the end and having those moments with Nobu, for me, Uncle, you know what I mean? These things to see him grow and feel and have pain. I really dug him. And that's why as soon as a Funko put out hey, here's a limited edition Funko Pop of him, I bought it like a sucker, like the sucker I am. I'm like, I love this guy. I'm buying his pop. But outside of him, I think, and it's a weird one because I do love Lady Masako. I did love Sensei, but Kenji got introduced and I was like, this guy is like the annoying comic relief. I'm going to hate him. And I ate up his journey and his side stuff. And by the time when you have that conversation with him of like, why are you just fleecing people. You could do so much more. And he has that thing of like, all right, I will. And it's like, holy shit, that's awesome. I just inspired this guy. And like, we saw him go from just the, hey, I'm going to steal all the sake and steal his stuff and sell him ping pong ball parts or whatever. He's like, no, I got this. And I was like, oh my God.
Joe Pesci
awesome.
very fast in your impression.
Hey, I'm Kenji. You know what I mean? Imran, who was your favorite?
For me, it was, I think Masako was probably the one for me. Just because like, when you see her as, like, you mentioned her as murder grandma, but like you
her
can tell
quest was
that
awesome.
even at like her in her like 60s, she is as good as Jin. And so you have to imagine when she was younger, she was probably she was the Ghost of Tsushima of that time. And I love the idea that you can see her start to, like, she has almost like no growth during her side quest. It is her mostly being on revenge, and then suddenly realize like, yeah, I don't need to maybe kill everyone, just most people. But the scene with the former housekeeper, the former maid, where you find out her and Masako used to be lovers, it's like, oh, that actually gives a lot more depth to her character all of a sudden. Of now I realize she's not just a murder machine. She had a life, she had a husband, she had a family, and at times she got bored with these things, and she ended up falling in love with a woman. And the part where she tries to explain to Jin, like, we were very close, and Jin's like, I don't need to hear it. It's fine, whatever. Just you do you. I think that is good, emblematic of their relationship, where they've bonded over this shared revenge. And the second she starts getting to be more of a human, Jin's like, I'm aware of it, but that's your life and you've lived a long one. And I think it's you follow your star. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I loved that. I loved her quest line because it was for me too. Like, it kept me guessing because I was really like, all right. So at one point I was like, so her husband must have survived, right? It's something like you're talking about how, it sounds like very personal story and how this thing. So then to actually get there and be surprised at the ending and have it make sense and like have the love interest I liked. We haven't talked at all. I mean, shout out to Yuriko, right? Like, I thought she's awesome in general. Of she's helpful grandma, not murder grandma. And but then to also see her not only ravaged by dementia, but like also wrestling with what you're asking her to do, and her being like, again, not that I'm trying to drive the Batman thing home this much, but like the Alfred who's like along for the ride of like, all right, if this is what you need me to do, Jin, I will. But going through that, seeing it, having her start to slip more and more and lose time, and start to think Jin is his father and what that relationship was, and the explanations there, I was like, oh, this is great too. Like, just getting to hang out with these characters. And I think that's what's you do so well, right, on these side quests, is not only are you there for the killing and the gameplay and the whatever, there is so much just hanging out. Let's make a haiku together. Let's do these things that I think in another game I would not roll my eyes at, but not be invested in. Whereas like for every one of the haikus, it was like, what are we reflecting on? All right, what should I look around at? No, I don't like that line. Oh, I like that line. And start trying to actually piece it together to make something.
What? Real quick question. What was the grandma's, well, not the grandma, but like the nanny?
Yuriko?
Yuriko. What was her relationship with his dad? Was there...
They were
lovers, right? Okay.
I thought that. I didn't know if I was being crazy.
Because it creeped me out when she was... Like, there was some... Like, when she was like, oh, you're mistaking him with his father, and like... things getting a little weird, and it's like, I don't like this. I don't like you're like a grandma figure. So like, stop this.
For a second there, I was starting to think like, wait, is she about to say that she's Jin's real mom? Like, wait a second, is that where this is all building to? But no, it just builds to, they were lovers, right? And like how I love that. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but I love her story of like, spending the night with you, taking care of sick Jin was the happiest I've ever been. Does that make me a bad person, right? When she's completely lost in the moment with Jin, thinking it's the father. Like, that was so heartbreaking, but also like so powerful, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Also, I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, Nate, but like, how could you break my heart the way you did with Sora? Like there was no reason to do that. The amount of times we were riding, and he would say, or Jin would say, like, oh, after all this, we're just going to go on a peaceful, like, ride. And I'd be like, yeah, we are. It's going to be great. And we never got a chance to.
Damn.
War is hell. What do you...
If you would have just given it up to the Mongols, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Did we talk about like the moments
Khan
where
asked you to surrender 7 times.
that is a good point. He did ask us to surrender a lot. Have we talked about the moments where you'll do an assassination and then that'll trigger like a story moment of like, you know, a flashback to Jin talking to his uncle and like his uncle teaching him the samurai way? Because those are some of the coolest moments for me as I was playing the game.
Yeah, those flashbacks are dope.
That was
like,
one thing that I mean, I think was a bit of a challenge to try and explain the code of the samurai to people, because we didn't really want to be like a textbook. We wanted to personalize it. And so how did Jin learn about these rules from his uncle, and how does he get haunted by them, even though he doesn't stop, right? So he jumps down and he smashes a guy from above, kills him. And there's that moment of saying, I got to do it. And so I'm a fan of those, because in an open world setting, those play completely dynamically. They're based exclusively on what you do as the player. And so it's you making these choices in time, and then you get that little narrative hit from the uncle kind of repeating his warning. So it's still in you. You know that what Jin is doing makes him feel a little cringy, but he's not going to stop.
You can't. Blessing, while you stepped away, the question was asked from Nate, who our favorite character was. Who was your favorite character?
Oh, favorite character. Man, that's difficult. And like, so I was one of the people that mainlined the game because toward the path of reviewing this game, I thought that I was not making good time, because I during Act 1, I was doing all the side stuff and I was clearing out that portion of the island. And I got to Act 2 and I looked at how long I'd been playing the game and I was like, shoot, I got a mainline. Ended up beating the game, you know, like quite a few days before the review. And so like then I went back and started doing more of the side stuff, but I haven't gotten to do all the tales that I've wanted to. And so like right now I really like Lady Masako. I mean, one, just because she is this murder machine.
Murder grandma.
Murder grandma, yeah, and I love her for that. But I also do really like the uncle. And so like shout out to the uncle, shout out to the Khan. I'm just giving shout outs now.
Yeah, now you're just listing everybody in the game. You're like looking at the IMDb,
like,
you're just going down the list.
yeah.
Big fan of Norio.
I haven't gotten to do any of his stuff yet. Like,
dude, you got to.
The end of the line is gruesome.
Yeah, the character side quests I think are just so well done, because they are. We're talking about earlier, right? The Lone Wolf and Cub, like here's an episode, right? Of you're just doing something in town. These longer ones that are pieced together tell such interesting stories, and Norio's entire journey, and him go from one very specific place to a completely different place by the end. It's like, holy shit!
Yeah,
I didn't see that coming.
I really liked Kenji also. Like, I thought that was a very good like comedic character that like added levity throughout. And also shout out to Yuna. Like, I really like Yuna as a character. I think she does a good job of like you said, Nate, like adding that opposite perspective of the uncle and kind of pushing you forward and pushing you on your journey. So I'm gonna pick Yuna as my favorite. I'm gonna say Yuna is the entire cast.
Actually, speaking of Uncle Shimura, like, so I was trying to piece together through the flashbacks and through like the main story. He seemed like he was a good uncle/father to Jin. I could not tell if he was a good lord to Tsushima, because there was the thing with the Yarikawa rebellion, which seemed to imply that. So they said it was like, oh, one of them got drunk and decided to cause a big riot. It's like, but when you actually go to Yarikawa, they seemed like they were actually very pissed about the whole thing and did not think Shimura treated them well.
Yeah, they hate Clan Sakai and they hate Clan Shimura. They were, in their eyes, oppressed by them. So yeah, in the history is that Jin's father Kazumasa and Lord Shimura just dominated them and slew all their samurai and made them second class. So he's not a perfect person at all. Mm-hmm. And those sins that he had done, Jin has to kind of work through in the game to win back the Yarkowans, who inherently don't trust him and think that he's just a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not everyone's perfect.
Yeah.
No, and I like that about it. I like that I like that with every character. I like that Sensei Ishikawa, right? Like it was very much that he starts off and I mean, by the end he is too, still like very pompous and sure of himself and yada yada yada. But he lets his humanity come through at times, right? And he does question himself and if he did the right thing and if this is it, what have his actions led to, and then even to getting back with Tomo, right, and not having it be like they don't fight to the death, right? They are this thing and they do have this moment, even if it is from a boat to a shore. Like you have a moment with them of like, all right, cool, this is what it is. Like I like that the game doesn't exist in a black and white scenario of like this is good and that's bad. Even like you're talking about, Nate, that in some ways maybe the Khan was actually offering the olive branch, even though the Mongols are just there to kill everything nonstop.
The only morally good person in the game is the guy who tells you the tales that gets you to specific items.
The musician or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody got anything else? Any other pressing questions? Blessing, are you satiated?
And I think I am satiated. I feel like I'm a ghost,
Oh, you are the ghost? Yeah, maybe you should
I
go
am the
platinum it
ghost.
tonight,
I mean, maybe
Know what
not
I mean?
tonight because I have a lot to do still.
Here we go.
That's a big world with a lot of things to do in it, and so mainlining it and coming back to it has just left me with a lot of tasks.
So I have a question for
Please do.
you two guys that platinumed it.
Hey, all right.
Why? How did you decide to take on side quests? Now, I've told you that my hope for players is that they ignore the trunk of the tree. They don't just do Jin's tales one after another, that they go off and they do the friend character chains, or they just find other things. What got you to kind of go off that main path and explore?
We kind of talked about this a little with like the Breath of the Wild comparisons, but the way I play Breath of the Wild was I had a heading and I just do whatever it was on the way to the heading. I'll get distracted by whatever I want. It kind of worked the same way for me as like, for example, with the 6 duels quest, I saw the duels on the map and I was like, that's far away. I'm going to have to like dedicate some time to going there. So I would do that. And just like, as I did that, I would do other stuff on the way. So like, for the most part, that worked out. Like with character quests, I look at the number first and a lot of variety. Of, like, I just want to know, like, if I'm not going to do 5 main missions in a row, I want to do some variety of this. I want to get everyone on the same number before I move on, which is just OCD a little bit. But for the most part, I wanted to travel Tsushima and do things as they came about naturally.
Yeah, for me, it was similar because for me, it was clearing the maps, right? Where it was, I wanted to obviously, get to whatever the mission was, but I'd put on the traveler gear and start going and see the fog of war lift, and it would be a question marks over there, or white smoke, or something would stop me, or it would be too of like stopping and fighting bandits or Mongols, and then getting whoever you're saving. They say something interesting, and I do want to go do that. Like it was that sense of the world's my oyster. Where do I want to take it? How do I want to do? And to your point, I think, Nate, from way back talking about this game and comparing it to Infamous, and that how Infamous, of course, is like a jungle gym and there's a million things. This one, having it spaced out, was more of for me, the idea of looking at the map and being like, all right, cool. Even if I'm going just, due north and there's the mission I want to do, but I look over here and the fog's cleared and there's just 2 question marks and they're pretty close together, I would, go east, right? And I would go and do those to knock them out to then move to the next thing. And I just kept organically going that way. And, my hope had been that I would be able to do everything and then platinum it with beating the final mission. Because I feel like that's, again, to your trunk of the tree argument, like I wanted all the branches extended, but then to make review embargo and everything, I ended up deviating from that and coming back and then just cleaning up what I needed to clean up and run around and do that. But
okay, cool. So if it wasn't for the review deadline, you just would have gone wide.
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's the best way to do it. You know what I mean? Because I think it is that so much attention and detail went into those character side quests that even like it was that thing for me of like, I'm a weird completionist / story guy. So even when we got there and like, it's like, okay, we're about to do the final attack. Talk to your friends if you want. It's optional. I'm like, well, I'm going to talk to my friends. And walking up to each one of them and being to like Lady Moscow, I'm like, thank you for being here. I know we still haven't caught your killer. I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, God damn it. I wish we were here saying, I know we've caught your killer and now we're going to go do this. Yeah. Thank you for everything. I was like, fuck. Like, that's how I felt. I felt connected to those characters. I wanted to take care of those characters. I thought it was interesting that, I don't know how, right? But Norio, like, when he got introduced, I didn't realize he was one of the starring side characters, that he'd have his own quest. And so I'd already done a bunch of everybody else's, and then he popped up, and I was kind of like, oh, like, you're kind of a Johnny come lately. I don't really get who you are. And I ran off and did a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think even pushed it to Act 3 and then started doing his stuff. And I was like, fuck, even you are awesome. And I really wish I would have started this earlier and really gotten you where you needed to be. Because yeah, by the end of that, finishing all those off and having this team that you like, this weird Ocean's 11 Avengers squad you've assembled that you've all gone through some shit with, right? It reminds me so much of Mass Effect 2 and like having those missions, those loyalty missions to get Jacob and Jack and make them fucking your people.
That is the nicest compliment I've ever heard. Mass Effect 2 is the greatest game that's ever been made by human beings. Sub Legend of Zelda.
I kept wishing, God, what was her? I don't remember her name. The boss lady of Imaragi Cove. Like, I kept wishing she had more stuff because I was hoping she'd like start
Lady Sanjo.
Lady Sanjo, because she seemed cool, and I wanted to like get to know her better, but it's just that one quest.
Yeah. I wish we'd given her more time. All right, I have another question for you guys, and this is me trying to learn how to make video games better.
Sure.
When you got the ghost stance, and you can decapitate a leader and power it up, or you can kill, a certain number of dudes, and the Mongols or Straw Hats in your area will become kind of fretful because you've been slaying their pals. Yeah. Did you get that ghost stance meter up through stealth or through just straight up fighting guys?
For me, it would be stealth.
Yeah.
For me, it was fighting guys because I basically by that point in the game I had a build that was centered around terrifying enemies. So it was just very easy to, when I'd kill one, like 3 would fall to the ground, just immediately just go stab them. Then if you're wearing the ghost outfit, it becomes very easy to just after like 4 or 5 enemies, just be in ghost stance. So I was basically terrifying people. It was just a roulette of people terrifying people and then ghost stance, then terrifying more people until entire camps were decimated.
Yeah, once I got the ghost armor, that was what I was wearing, right? Because again, at that point, like I think it's such a credit to the story and what we're trying to do, right? That we got to this point that Jin's like, no, I am the Ghost of Tsushima, right? And I was like, I am the Ghost of Tsushima. And I got that armor and I wore that armor. And I'm like, now the gloves are off. I'm going to stealth everything. I'm going to Sly Cooper on these wires and jump down on people and do everything. And use the poison and use the hallucinogens. And so just by, I think, nature of playing that game that way, the ghost stance was being filled in by stealth. And then it would be all right, there's just a few people, go out there, assassinate one, show myself, ghost stance, kill all of them. And then I'm thinking of it when I'm taking down the larger Mongol encampments, right? Of then move to the next section to get the next hostage free or whatever it would be.
Yeah, I know for me in the way that I played the game, especially toward the end, I'd use stealth as kind of the setup for me then entering like the samurai, like actual face-to-face fighting combat. And so like a lot of times I would take out, let's say like the first 5 Mongols or Straw Hats through stealth, and then that would then transition into me going ham and then throwing kunai and doing all this stuff and actually like entering combat. And naturally like through that I would then end up having ghost stance, and that like if I hadn't eliminated everybody by then there'd be like very few people left for me to just like take out.
Question, Nate. I think Imran and I might have talked about this, or maybe it was me and Bless, but there was a thing of how does the game decide when we can do a standoff and when we can't? There were times where I'd be riding at a bunch of enemies and I'm like, all right, hold up on the D-pad, and they would all start looking at me and I'm like, oh, go, go, go. And then I would just be fighting them normally.
Man, I wish I had made that clear. It is when you're approaching a group of Mongols, we invisibly make a perimeter around them. So every roadblock or war camp, the code looks at where all the enemies are and then makes kind of a line that says this is where they've held this position and you're over here. So as they get close to that perimeter, it's like Jin is approaching them from a distance and they haven't drawn swords yet. So they don't know necessarily that he's a threatening person, that he's as powerful as the ghost. Mm-hmm. And you have the option if you're outside of that perimeter.
Okay.
The meta is just supposed to be when you're approaching Mongols and they haven't drawn on you yet, you can call them out and say, send
challenge
out your best.
Me.
Yeah, fight me. And they don't know what they're up against yet. These fools don't know that they're facing the ghost. And so they'll come out and get you. Sounds like you guys every now and then hit a snag where you didn't get it, which sucks.
I mean, I think fighting in general is fun in your game, so it wasn't that bad. Yeah. I wasn't like, oh, this is ruining the experience. I was just like, what am I missing? Why can I do it sometimes and not other times?
Greg brought up this.
How often were you
How often was I attempting? I would say pretty much any time I came up on people in the road. Yeah, that would definitly be the thing.
The road was the time I mostly just didn't get it.
Yeah.
Were you ever in stealth and you would see it kind of flash and you'd be like,
oh yeah, totally.
A couple times.
Yeah, and the same thing with like challenge remaining enemies and stuff. I was like, I could, but I've come so far stealthing everybody. Like I'm kind of committed to being the ghost here. I don't feel like screaming at this point. Kind of detrimental to everything I've done.
That screwed me over a couple of times. Not like by my own fault. Was I would challenge remaining enemies because I could see them just standing upstairs in a room. And like I could take these two guys on. Then like a guy with a bow and arrow like across the way started shooting at me and like. Shit, I did not see him. This is a problem.
Yeah, totally. I did that too. Of like, oh, there's only a couple guys left, and like 6 come down as early in the game. Like, oh no.
So Greg brought up the Sly Cooper thing like a few minutes ago, talking about how you would Sly Cooper stealth your way through, and we got a question on PSW XOXO earlier this week about like, do we see DNA of other Sucker Punch games within this game? And so like Nate, for you, is there DNA of like Sly Cooper and or Infamous and most importantly Rocket Robot on Wheels in this game?
Yes. So Rocket Robot on Wheels featured a parabola showing you where you would throw a thing and where it would land. That's Rocket Robot on Wheels.
There it is. Wow.
Sly Cooper featured
look, you're right.
a good deal of platforming.
Oh my God.
And the feel of Sly, where you hit the button and there's this immediacy to what's going on. There's air steering even in this game, which is a platform mechanic that happens to exist in our very realistic game. That is Sly Cooper. Actually, the code that was used to make Sly's tail, we still use that for simulation. And then Infamous, of course, it's an open world game where we kind of set up how we would make going from one thing to another with mission starts that would exist and pop up and go down. I mean, we just keep building off what we know. And there you go.
That's really cool. The parabola thing is actually blowing my mind a little bit right now.
Well, I mean, it's pretty standard in video games at this point, right? Like, but it is the same thing we've been doing for a while because it works.
Yeah.
Well, this works too, Nate. Congratulations. I'm a huge fan of this game.
I'm thank you guys for taking the time to play it, talk about it, and then talk to me as well. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Thank everybody up there except Andrew Goldfarb. Tell him he did nothing.
Yeah, dude, I will insult him to his face for you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this, of course, has been the Kinda Funny Gamescast. Remember, each and every week we come together to talk about the things we love going on in video games. If you love that, head over to patreon.com/kindafunnygames, where you can get the show ad-free. You can submit your questions. You can usually get a post show. I'm not going to make Nate sit around even longer talking to us in a post show, so don't worry about that. Yeah, and that's it, right? You can get on, if you don't want to spend any money, youtube.com/kindafunnygames. Come on over, subscribe, share it with your friends, get it on podcast services around the globe. And until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.